So what if a global crisis, a real battle between superpowers, didn't kick off with a missile, but with a Big Mac? Yeah, you heard that right. Let's really get into this, because what might look like just another trade dispute is actually turning into a full-blown war over symbols.
It all kicks off with this number, 300%. I mean, just let that sink in. That's the huge tariff that both China and India are proposing on all US fast food imports. And you guessed it, their #1 target? The Golden Arches. This is way more than just a tax, It's a massive statement.
So right away, the battle lines are drawn. And if you really want to understand what's going on here, we have to look at this as more than just an economic move. This is the first shot fired in a much bigger war, a war over cultural influence.
Okay, to really get a grip on this, we need to talk about this idea called soft power. It's basically a country's ability to get what it wants by being attractive and persuasive through its culture instead of using force. And believe it or not, for decades, McDonald's has been one of America's most powerful and, let's be honest, tastiest tools of soft power.
I mean, just think about it for a second. When you saw those golden arches pop up in places like Shanghai or New Delhi, it wasn't just a sign for a burger joint, was it? No, it was a symbol. It meant the American way of life had arrived. Capitalism, convenience, all that influence. And what's so wild is that that exact symbol is now being turned into a bullseye.
And this doesn't seem like a coincidence at all. It really looks like a coordinated attack. You've got China proposing its tariff to, and I quote, counter-cultural influence. Meanwhile, India is framing a very similar move as a way to declare cultural independence and, boost their own local brands. The message couldn't be clearer. They are pushing back, and they're doing it together.
So, how do you think the U.S. responds to an attack on one of its biggest cultural icons? Well, as you might expect, Washington strikes back, and they strike back hard.
The reaction from the White House was, immediate and incredibly intense. The source material points to this quote from Donald Trump, who said, "This is not just about burgers. This is an attack on the American way of life." So right out of the gate, this whole thing was framed as a defense of American identity itself. The stakes were raised instantly. And Washington's answer came in the form of its own big number, 200%, a direct counter tariff slapped right on Chinese goods. This thing was escalating in real time. But what did the U.S. target? See, they didn't go after food. They went straight for the jugular of China's export economy. The strategy was crystal clear. You hit our cultural symbols, we hit your supply chains. We're talking steel, consumer goods, and all those critical electronics like phones and laptops.
Well, the markets, they absolutely hated this. Not one bit. The immediate reaction was a nearly 500-point plunge in the Dow Jones. And suddenly, this wasn't just some political showdown on the news anymore. It was directly hitting people's pensions and retirement funds. It just goes to show you how connected everything really is.
Any trade war that can rattle Wall Street like that was never going to stay contained between just 3 countries. It was escalating way too fast, and this whole conflict was about to go global.
And to really see the global threat here, you have to look at the BRICS nations. Now, this is an alliance of major emerging economies, and get this, they represent over 40% of the entire world's population. So when these countries act together, believe me, the whole global system feels the shockwaves.
So, who are the BRICS? We're talking Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And with China and India already leading the charge, the source material says that other members, like Brazil and South Africa, are already thinking about making similar moves against American cultural exports. This could go from a dispute to a full-on systemic shock, real fast.
So, what about America's old allies in Europe? Where are they in all this? Well, they are completely stuck. They're caught between a rock and a hard place, torn between their alliance with the U.S. and the very real fear of inflation and massive supply chain problems. And with Brussels basically paralyzed by indecision, the global instability just keeps getting worse.
Okay, but all this global drama, what does it actually mean for everyday people? Let's bring this whole thing back home and talk about how the crisis hits home. See, McDonald's isn't just a brand name. It's a gigantic buyer of American farm products, so a crisis in Beijing instantly becomes a crisis for farmers in Nebraska selling beef, or folks in Idaho growing potatoes, or dairy farmers in Wisconsin. The list just goes on and on. This international fight has a direct pipeline right into the American heartland.
There was an American farm leader who put it perfectly. He said, "When McDonald's sneezes, we all catch pneumonia."
And wow, that really just drives home how deep these economic ties are, and just how vulnerable it makes so many American industries. All right, so we've seen the economic fallout, we've seen the political moves, but beyond all the tariffs and the stock market drops, there's a final piece to this puzzle, and it's all about the battle for hearts and minds, a new kind of war of symbols.
And it's really fascinating to see the different tactics China and India are using. In China, it's very top-down. You have state-run media calling McDonald's a Western cultural invasion. But in India, it's more of a grassroots thing, with entrepreneurs pushing local brands as the patriotic alternative. So you've got two very different strategies, but they're aimed at the exact same goal, turning public opinion against a huge American icon.
And this really is the big takeaway. This isn't a traditional conflict at all. We're looking at a totally new kind of battlefield. The weapons here aren't missiles or tanks, the logos, movies, and yeah, even fast food.
Which leaves us with one final, really crucial question. In a world where a simple burger can be turned into a political weapon, where massive boycotts can be organized with just a hashtag, can America's soft power, its cultural influence, actually survive this new boycott generation? That is the billion-dollar question at the very heart of these new burger wars.